So recently, when we were in a meeting, I won't say who said this, but someone said that sometimes at Christmas and Easter, when you walk into a Unity Church or Unity Spiritual Center, that it's hard to tell whether you're at Unity or whether you're at a Methodist church, because things don't really look any different. And when we were here decorating yesterday, I was like, wow, that's right. It doesn't look much different, does it? We have all the trappings, right? We have the creche, the star, we have the Advent wreath here, and heck, we even have a cross. So how are we different? How are we different? How is Unity different from any other Christianity that celebrates Christmas? And so what I would say about that is that we're different because we don't really look at the story necessarily as historically factual, as literal. I know when I first got into New Thought, coming from a traditional Christian background, I had the same question. I was thinking, if we don't believe the story is actually factual, if we're not looking at the story as historical, why do we keep promoting it? Why do we keep talking about it? And then after a while, I realized that whether or not we teach that it's historically factual or not, we talk about the truth in it. Just because something is not necessarily factual doesn't mean there's not truth in it, right? There's great truth in this age-old story. The Christian story, the narrative of the birth of Jesus of Nazareth and what that represents for us, how we can look at it a little differently. Now, I want to say, I have been reading this book by Marcus Borg called The First Christmas. And I was touched by something he said in the book. For a moment, we return to the truth of parable and the question of historical factuality. We do not think Matthew's story is historically factual. In our judgment, there was no special star, no wise men, and no plot by Herod to kill Jesus. So is the story factually true? No. But as parable, is it true? For us as Christians, the answer is a robust affirmative. There's great truth in the story. And so, as we are exploring this story this year, as our wise men sort of alluded to, we're beginning with these three guys right here. Now, traditionally, we conclude the Christmas story with the wise men. In fact, there's a whole, in the liturgical calendar, there's what we call Epiphany that happens on January 6th, which is a celebration of the wise men arriving at Bethlehem to worship Jesus. So we're doing it a little bit backwards this year. And we're doing that because the wise men represent this idea of hope. Hope. At least we're allowing them to be our representatives of that concept. And what I want to say is that sometimes, again, how we differ a little bit from traditional Christianity is that in many Christian churches, these candles or these ideas of hope and love and peace and joy represent the values, the virtues that Jesus brings to us. The way I'm approaching it, the way we'd like to approach it, is that these are states of consciousness or states of mind and heart that help us to open ourselves up to a more expansive understanding and realization of that indwelling presence of the Christ within us. And so hope. Today we look at hope. What is hope? I found a definition of hope that says hope is a feeling of I can't remember it now. A feeling of that anticipation, that something desired will happen. A feeling of that anticipation or that anticipation that something we desire will happen. And so I want to take that apart just a little bit as we talk about desire. What is desire? Why do we desire anything? Really, why do we desire anything? Anything. Why do we desire something to happen? Why do we desire a new job or a new car or a new relationship, or we desire something to happen in our lives? I think we desire something because of how we think it's going to enrich our lives. We desire money because somehow it gives us freedom, or somehow it gives us some sense of safety or security. Same thing for a job. We desire a job because a job may give us an opportunity to use our gifts and talents and then to help generate some income. We enjoy relationships because in some way it's going to affect how we feel, what we experience. And so that's the reason we desire anything, I think, is because once we have it, or we believe that when we have that thing, it's going to enrich our experience. And so that's how we look at desire. When we're looking at this Advent season, the desire that we're looking at is this idea of the indwelling Christ being born in our awareness. And we celebrate the birth of Jesus as the expression of that for us, but that we talk about the birth of the Christ happening within us. And so that's our desire. And that was the desire of people in Jesus' time. The desire of salvation, the desire of deliverance, the desire of freedom, the desire to be freed. And they believed that this birth of the Messiah was going to bring them this deliverance. This one who was the chosen was going to bring them deliverance. And so they desired that birth of the Christ. They looked forward to it with great expectancy and anticipation. And that's how we are approaching this Advent season. That's the desire. Because we find freedom and safety and expression as we awaken to that indwelling Christ. So that's how we're looking at this season of Advent. And we look at this idea of expectancy or anticipation, a hope. You know, hope is not just sitting around wishing that something's going to happen. Hope is this active feeling, this active emotion that calls us to something. It's not just thinking, oh, well, you know, if it happens, it's okay. It's active, it's alive. And so hope is that, I use this in my blog, but I love this analogy that Eckhart Tolle uses in The Power of Now when he talks about the power of presence. It's like a cat sitting in front of a mouse hole, just waiting with rapt attention and anticipation, expectancy for when that mouse is going to emerge, right? That's the idea of hope. It's waiting with rapt attention and expectancy and energy for the awakening, for the spark of awareness of that indwelling Christ. And so that's hope. To me, that's an idea of what hope really is for us. It's desire, and it's that expectancy, that anticipation that something is going to happen. So why do the wise men represent that to us? Why do the wise men represent that state of consciousness? Well, again, we're not talking about, as Marcus Borg says, it's not about whether they were historically factual characters or not, but what do they represent for us in the overall story? What aspect of us do they represent? And as they represent hope for us, I think there are three ways, in my mind, that they represent that hope for us. One is, as the wise men talked about earlier, wise men represent that willingness to listen to the inner wisdom, the inner guidance. In fact, the word magi was really referring to not sorcerers or people who do magic, but magi is a word that refers to someone who has greater knowledge or awareness beyond the physical. And so the magi are those wise people who see beyond this limited experience and see at a deeper level what is going on, what is happening, see into different dimensions and access that wisdom. And so the wise men for us represent that internal wisdom, that guidance that is always within us, and their willingness to listen to it, to follow it. So I want to say to all of us today that you are wise men and wise women. You have the wisdom. That light is within you. And the wise men represent that part of us. They also represent the willingness to follow that guidance, to follow the star, so to speak, that intuition, that inner knowing that the star represents in the story. Now imagine if they really were factual people, historical people. They came from the east. Now, what is east of Jerusalem? What is east of Israel? Iran. What was then Mesopotamia? And if you are aware of what the terrain of that country is like, it's very rocky and mountainous. It's not easy terrain to traverse. But these wise men represent that within us that is willing to follow the star no matter what it takes. To follow that inner Christ no matter what is required of us. And I will tell you from my own experience, sometimes that ain't easy. I used to have this idea that living the Christ life or surrendering to Christ, not that I have done it completely or that I am an example of that, but the idea that you surrender to Christ and then your life is just like floating on air, living on a cloud. Nothing bad happens. Of course, bad and good is all judgment anyway, but, life is easy. I don't think that's the way it is. I mean, look at Jesus, for God's sake. He didn't have it very easy. So it's our willingness to do whatever it takes to follow the star. And we all have that within us. We talked about that before with our power of strength. When we activate that, we have that. And then lastly, what they bring to that experience, that they bring their best. They bring their riches. They bring their frankincense and gold and myrrh. They bring their best gifts. They bring all that they have to the party of life. And so they represent for us listening to that wisdom within us, looking beyond what we think we know, looking beyond how it's always been, looking beyond our habits and usual ways of being, looking to that light within us to guide us, paying attention to that, and then doing what it takes. But not just haphazardly or flippantly, but to bring our best, to always bring our riches, our highest and our best good to everything that we do in living our truth. And so I think that for me is what is represented by this energy, this consciousness of hope and faith. But hope, it's active, it's alive. It touches on our desire to be free, to experience life, to experience the goodness, the vitality of life. And to do that with great anticipation, expectancy, to follow our guidance, and to bring our best and our highest good to every moment. So as we go through the season of Advent, I just invite us to not only embrace hope, but then we will also be talking about the other aspects as well. But as you approach this week, I invite you to really take time to listen to your guidance, to your own wisdom, and ask what is necessary to follow that guidance and to always bring your best.